November 1997. Rain streaks down the windows of Kensington Palace. The apartments are empty now, silent. Outside the gates, flowers pile higher than a man can reach. Teddy bears, handwritten notes, photographs of a woman who died 3 months ago in a tunnel in Paris. Inside, the rooms wait. The dressing room, where she chose what to wear for that panorama interview. The sitting room, where she planned which charities to support and which royal engagements to quietly sabotage. The bedroom, where she made phone calls at midnight to journalists she was not supposed to trust. Diana Spencer lived here for 15 years. She raised her sons here. She fought with her husband here. She cried here. And when the marriage finally shattered, she stayed, planning something the palace had not anticipated. Not just survival, revenge. If you enjoy deep investigations into royal residences and the families who inhabited them, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Tell me in the comments which royal palace we should explore next. Your support makes these detailed investigations possible. Thank you for being here. The flowers outside are already rotting in the November damp. The cards are bleeding ink, but the question they represent will not fade. Who was Diana really? The fairy tale princess the world thought it knew, or the woman trapped inside Kensington Palace, who understood exactly how the system worked and decided to burn it down from within? The palace knows. The walls remember. And if you listen carefully, past the official stories and the sanitized biographies, you can still hear what happened here. Not the romance, the calculation, not the tragedy, the war. This is not a story about a princess. This is a story about what you build when you realize the castle is also a prison, about what you sacrifice to escape, and about the price everyone pays when someone inside the system decides the truth matters more than the crown. Stand at the gates of Kensington Palace today. Look up at the red brick facade, the rows of tall windows, the formal symmetry. Tourists take photographs. School groups file past in organized lines. The gift shop sells commemorative plates and books about royal history. Everything is orderly, managed, safe. Step back 30 years. December 1981. A young woman arrives at these same gates. She is 20 years old. She has been married for 5 months. She is already pregnant. She moves into apartments that have been prepared for her. Rooms decorated by palace staff. Furniture chosen by people she has never met. A life designed before she arrived to inhabit it. Her name is Diana Frances Spencer. In 5 months, she has gone from kindergarten assistant to Princess of Wales. The transformation has been so fast, she barely understands what has happened. The wedding was watched by 750 million people worldwide. More than half the planet saw her marry Prince Charles in St. Paul's Cathedral. She wore a dress with a 25-foot train. She stumbled over his name during the vows. Everyone thought it was charming. Nervous bride, fairy tale nerves. She knew better. She had already seen the warning signs. 2 weeks before the wedding, she found a bracelet Charles had commissioned, a gift for another woman, Camilla Parker Bowles. She considered calling it off. Her sisters told her it was too late. Her face was already on the tea towels. So she married him, and now she lives here, in Kensington Palace, in apartments that feel both enormous and suffocating. Rooms filled with antique furniture, paintings of people she does not know, staff who watch her constantly and report back to someone, though she is never quite sure to whom. The apartment is technically theirs, Charles and Diana's, but Charles is rarely here. He has Highgrove, his country estate, where he spends most of his time. He has his schedule of engagements, his charities, his polo matches, his life that was fully formed before Diana entered it, and continues largely without her input. She is expected to fit into that life, to mold herself around its existing shape. No one has asked what she wants. No one has explained the rules. She is simply supposed to know. The pregnancy is difficult. She is sick. constantly. Morning sickness that stretches through the entire day. She loses weight despite being pregnant, her frame thinning while her belly swells. The palace doctors monitor her carefully. She is carrying an heir to the throne. Her body is no longer entirely her own. It is a vessel for something more important than her personal comfort. Charles does not seem to understand, or perhaps he understands and does not care. He has his routines, his obligations. He is kind in a distant, formal way. He asks how she is feeling. He pats her hand, then he leaves for another engagement, another meeting, another weekend at Highgrove, where Camilla is often, coincidentally, also a guest. Diana begins to realize something no one had warned her about. She is incredibly famous and completely alone. Millions of people care about her in the abstract, as a symbol, as a fairy tale, as a photograph in a magazine. But inside Kensington Palace, in the actual rooms where she eats and sleeps and cries, she is isolated in a way she has never experienced before. She cannot leave without permission and a security detail. She cannot make a phone call without wondering if someone is listening. She cannot trust the staff because she does not know who they work for. Really, the household, yes, but the household serves the institution, and the institution's interests do not necessarily align with hers. Her friends from before the marriage drift away. Some are intimidated by her new status. Others are quietly discouraged from visiting by palace officials who believe the Princess of Wales should cultivate a more appropriate social circle. Her family sees her less frequently. She is busy, always busy, with engagements and fittings and appearances. And when she does have time, she is too exhausted, too sick, too overwhelmed to reach out. She starts to understand the basic architecture of her new life. She is public property. Her image belongs to the monarchy. Her schedule is dictated by palace officials. Her clothing choices are scrutinized and must project the right message. Her friendships are managed. Her phone calls monitored. Her movements tracked. She is the most photographed woman in the world, and she has almost no privacy, almost no autonomy, almost no space to simply be herself. The palace operates on rules. No one has written down, but everyone seems to know except her. There are correct ways to address staff, correct times for meals, correct responses to official correspondence. There are protocols for public appearances, for private dinners, for interactions with other members of the royal family. Diana learns by making mistakes, by seeing the slight tightening around a courtier's mouth, by hearing Charles sigh when she does something wrong again. She tries to adapt. She reads the biographies of previous royal women, trying to find a template. She watches how other family members behave at official events, mimicking their posture and responses. She asks questions of the few staff members who seem sympathetic, though she is never sure if their sympathy is genuine or another form of management. Prince William is born in June 1982. The birth is front-page news around the world. Diana is 21 years old, a new mother, still trying to figure out how to be a wife and a princess, now responsible for an infant who happens to be second in line to the throne. Diana wants to be more hands-on than royal mothers typically were, but she is also expected to resume public duties quickly. 4 weeks after giving birth, she is back at official engagements, smiling for cameras, shaking hands, pretending everything is fine. It is not fine. She is struggling with what she will later recognize as postnatal depression. She feels overwhelmed, inadequate, trapped. Charles seems bewildered by her tears and moods. He is a man of routine and logic. He does not understand emotional volatility. He responds by spending more time away, at Highgrove, at his office, anywhere that feels more comfortable than the apartments at Kensington Palace, where his young wife cries behind closed doors. The marriage is fracturing before most people realize it has even truly begun. But to the outside world, everything looks perfect. The photographs show a beautiful young mother with a handsome baby and a prince. The crowds adore her. The press calls her the people's princess, though no one has asked what she thinks of the title or if she wants it. Inside Kensington Palace, Diana begins to learn something crucial. The gap between the public story and the private reality is enormous, and that gap is maintained deliberately by people whose job is to protect the institution, regardless of what it costs the individuals inside it. She is starting to realize she has been cast in a role. The script was written before she arrived. Her job is to perform it beautifully, to smile at the right moments, to produce heirs, to enhance the monarchy's image. Her feelings are not part of the equation. Her needs are secondary. Her suffering is private and must stay that way. Diana is young, but she is not stupid. She begins to watch more carefully, to notice how decisions are made, who has real power, how information flows through the palace. She is learning the system, and somewhere in the back of her mind, a question is forming. If they can control her, can she learn to control them? The thought is small at first, barely conscious, but it is there, and it will grow, because Diana Spencer, Princess of Wales, is about to discover something the palace had not anticipated. She is better at this game than they thought, and she has nothing left to lose. The system at Kensington Palace is invisible until you know what to look for. Then you see it everywhere. It operates through a hierarchy of staff, each with specific roles and carefully guarded territories. At the top, private secretaries who manage schedules, correspondence, and public image. Below them, ladies-in-waiting, equerries, press officers, and personal assistants. Further down, dressers, valets, housekeepers, cleaners, drivers, security. Every person in this structure reports to someone. Information flows upward. Decisions flow down. The system is designed to protect the institution first, the individual members of the royal family second, and their personal happiness not at all. Diana learns this gradually, through small incidents that reveal the machinery. She wants to change an engagement. The private secretary explains, politely but firmly, that the engagement was arranged months ago and cannot be altered without significant diplomatic awkwardness. She wants to wear a particular dress to an event. The dresser gently suggests that another choice might be more appropriate, and Diana realizes the suggestion came from someone higher up who had seen the proposed outfit and found it unsuitable. She wants to visit a friend for lunch. Security explains the logistical challenges, the advanced planning required, the need for route checks and secure locations. By the time all the requirements are laid out, the simple lunch has become a military operation, and Diana realizes it is easier to just stay home. Every boundary is presented as concern for her safety, respect for protocol or practical necessity. And perhaps those reasons are genuine, but the cumulative effect is total control. Diana cannot move freely, cannot act spontaneously, cannot make choices without them being filtered through layers of staff and institutional priorities. The phone system at Kensington Palace is particularly revealing. Calls go through a switchboard. Diana picks up the phone and asks to be connected to a number. Someone else dials it for her. She knows this means someone else knows whom she is calling. She begins to assume all her calls are noted, possibly monitored. She never knows for certain, but the assumption changes how she speaks, what she says, whom she contacts. Letters arrive screened and sorted. Staff open them, read them, decide which ones the princess needs to see, and which can be answered by form letter or simply filed away. Diana receives thousands of letters from the public, messages of support, requests for patronage, invitations, personal stories. She will never see most of them. Someone else decides what reaches her desk. Her diary is managed by her private secretary. Engagements are proposed by various organizations, vetted by palace officials, slotted into her schedule, based on priorities she does not always understand. She can express preferences, can request certain causes be prioritized, but the final decisions are rarely hers alone. The diary must balance her interests with the palace's strategic goals, must avoid conflicts with other royals' schedules, must maintain the right mix of glamorous and serious, domestic and international. Even her clothing is managed. Diana loves fashion, has strong personal taste, but every outfit for a public engagement is scrutinized. Is the hemline appropriate? Are the colors sending the right message? Will this dress photograph well? Does the designer have any political associations that might cause problems? The palace does not dictate exactly what she wears, but there are so many considerations, so many unspoken rules, that her choices narrow considerably. The staff at Kensington Palace are professionals, mostly polite, often genuinely devoted to serving the royal family. But they serve the institution. Their loyalty is not to Diana personally, but to the crown, to the system they have been trained to maintain. If Diana's interests conflict with the palace's priorities, they will side with the palace every time. They have to. That is how they keep their jobs. Diana begins to sense which staff members might be more sympathetic, who might bend a rule occasionally, who might keep a confidence. She cultivates relationships carefully, learning who can be trusted with small secrets, who reports everything upstairs. She starts to build her own informal network within the formal structure. One of the few areas where she has more freedom is her charity work. The palace encourages royal patronages. It is good public relations, and it gives royals something meaningful to do. Diana is assigned various charities connected to children, health, and the arts. She is expected to attend fundraisers, visit hospitals, lend her name and image to causes that need royal support. But here, Diana finds room to maneuver. She chooses which charities to engage with deeply, and which to keep at arm's length. She begins visiting hospitals and hospices not just for photo opportunities, but for real, substantive interactions. She holds hands with AIDS patients, at a time when much of the public still fears casual contact might transmit the disease. She sits on the edge of hospital beds and talks to sick children, ignoring protocol about maintaining proper distance. The palace press office is initially nervous about this. Diana is breaking unspoken rules about how royals should behave, getting too close, too emotional, too involved. But the public response is overwhelmingly positive. The photographs of Diana holding an AIDS patient's hand are front-page news worldwide. They shift public perception about the disease. They make people think differently about royals, about compassion, about what public service can mean. Diana sees the power of this. She is learning that she has a weapon. The palace did not fully control her image. The institution wants to manage her public persona, but she is discovering she can shape it herself. The cameras love her. The public adores her. If she chooses her moments carefully, she can create narratives that bypass the official palace machinery. This realization is dangerous, because once Diana understands that her fame gives her leverage, the power dynamic inside Kensington Palace begins to shift. She is no longer just a young woman trying to survive inside a system designed to contain her. She is becoming a player with her own strategies. But she is still very young, still emotionally fragile, still trapped in a failing marriage. Prince Harry is born in September 1984. The birth is easier than William's, but the marriage is harder. Charles is increasingly distant. Diana is increasingly unhappy. The fights are more frequent, more bitter. Diana develops bulimia. She binges and purges, a cycle she cannot seem to break. The palace doctors know. Charles knows. The staff know, but no one talks about it openly. Mental health struggles are not something the royal family acknowledges publicly. Diana is expected to manage it privately, to keep smiling in public, to maintain the facade. She makes a few attempts to harm herself, superficial cuts, gestures of desperation more than serious suicide attempts. She will later describe them as cries for help, ways to externalize pain when no one seems to hear her saying she is drowning. Charles does not know how to respond. He is frightened, perhaps, or simply unable to cope with this level of emotional chaos. He retreats further. The staff at Kensington Palace watch all of this. They see the princess losing weight, her eyes hollow, her smiles brittle. They see the prince arriving late, leaving early, his phone calls to Highgrove lasting longer than his conversations with his wife. They see the separate bedrooms, the cold silences, the explosive arguments behind closed doors, and they say nothing publicly. Because that is how the system works. What happens inside these walls stays inside these walls. The institution is protected. The individuals suffer privately. Diana is starting to understand the full architecture of her trap. She is famous beyond measure, but has almost no real power. She is adored by millions, but cannot escape a miserable marriage. She lives in a palace, but feels more imprisoned than people in actual prisons. She has wealth and titles and access to anything material she might want, but she cannot buy freedom, cannot purchase genuine love, cannot simply walk away from the role she has been assigned. She is the Princess of Wales. The world thinks it is a dream come true. Inside Kensington Palace, it feels like a nightmare she cannot wake from, and the more desperately she tries to break free, the tighter the system holds her. But Diana is learning. Every confrontation with palace officials, every restriction placed on her movement, every piece of her life controlled by others, is teaching her how the machinery works. And she is beginning to formulate a plan. Not escape, not yet, something more calculated. If they want to control her image, she will learn to control it better. If they want her to follow the script, she will perform so brilliantly, they will depend on her. And then, when they need her most, when the institution cannot afford to lose her, she will leverage that dependence. She is 23 years old. She is bulimic and depressed. She is in a failed marriage with no obvious exit. But she is not finished, not even close. Diana Spencer is about to transform from victim to strategist, and Kensington Palace is about to become not just her prison, but her war room. The public does not see the war. They see the fairy tale. Throughout the 1980s, Diana's star rises higher and higher. She is on magazine covers constantly. Fashion designers compete to dress her. Every haircut she gets becomes a global trend. When she wears a particular shade of lipstick, it sells out worldwide within days. She is a phenomenon. The palace initially struggles with this level of attention. They are accustomed to reverence for the queen, dutiful respect for the institution. Diana generates something different: obsession, fascination, love, almost, from people who have never met her but feel they know her. The crowds at her engagements are massive, chanting her name, pressing forward to touch her, hand her flowers, tell her how beautiful she is. Charles begins to notice that when they appear together, the crowds are disappointed. If Diana is on the opposite side of the street, they want her, not him. At a joint engagement in Australia, someone in the crowd shouts, "We want Diana, not you." It is said as a joke, but it stings. Charles has spent his entire life preparing to be king, and his wife, who knew nothing about royal life 2 years ago, has eclipsed him completely. The dynamic between them sours further. Charles feels overshadowed. Diana feels unloved. He retreats to his long-standing relationship with Camilla Parker Bowles, which has resumed after a brief pause around the wedding. Diana knows about Camilla, has known for a while, but having confirmation, seeing evidence, watching her husband prioritize another woman, is devastating. She confronts him. He denies nothing but acts as if she is being unreasonable. Camilla is an old friend. He is entitled to friends. Diana is being hysterical, paranoid, exhausting. The arguments go in circles. He will not give up Camilla. She cannot accept the situation. The marriage becomes a shell, maintained for public consumption, but hollow inside. Diana begins to fight back in the only way available to her. She uses her public image. She knows the press adores her. She knows photographers follow her everywhere. She begins to understand that she can communicate through clothes, through body language, through carefully chosen appearances. In 1985, Diana and Charles attend a gala dinner. She wears a stunning black dress, off the shoulder, elegant and daring. The same evening, Charles gives a speech and makes a comment about her outfit. The press seizes on the moment, speculating about tension between them. Diana has sent a message. She looks incredible. She is her own person. She will not be diminished. She starts working more closely with photographers she trusts, particularly those who treat her with respect rather than as prey. She learns which angles work best, how to position herself for the perfect shot, how to use fashion to convey emotion. A bright, cheerful outfit signals confidence. A more subdued choice hints at vulnerability. She is conducting a conversation with the public through images. The palace press office is increasingly alarmed. They are supposed to manage the royal family's image, but Diana is managing her own, and she is better at it than they are. The official photographs released by the palace are formal, stiff, traditional. Diana's candid moments, captured by the paparazzi, but often subtly encouraged by her, are warm, relatable, human. She visits homeless shelters and sits on the floor talking to people who have lost everything. She hugs children with terminal illnesses. She shakes hands with leprosy patients, breaking down stigma around diseases the public fears. Every action is genuine, driven by real compassion. But she also understands the power of these images. She is showing the world a different kind of royalty, not distant and ceremonial, but engaged and caring. The contrast with Charles becomes stark. He is photographed looking uncomfortable at official events, making awkward small talk, maintaining the formal distance traditional royals are trained to keep. Diana is photographed laughing, crying, embracing, connecting. The public decides she is the warm one, the caring one, the real one. Charles is cast as cold, old-fashioned, out of touch. This is not entirely fair to Charles. He is deeply committed to his charities, particularly environmental causes and support for young people. He works hard, often in ways that do not generate glamorous photo opportunities. But fair or not, the narrative solidifies. Diana is the people's princess. Charles is the stiff prince who does not appreciate her. Inside Kensington Palace, the tension is unbearable. They barely speak, except to coordinate logistics around the children. William and Harry are young, shielded as much as possible from their parents' disintegrating marriage, but they sense the coldness. Diana tries to give them as much normalcy as she can, taking them to theme parks and fast food restaurants, experiences far outside the usual royal childhood. Charles thinks she is being inappropriate, undermining their future roles. Diana thinks she is giving them a chance to be children. The staff at Kensington Palace are caught in the middle. Some are loyal to Charles, report back to him and his staff, view Diana as overly emotional and difficult. Others are sympathetic to Diana, see how isolated she is, recognize that the system has failed her. The household fractures into camps. Diana begins to cultivate her own team. She hires staff she trusts, people who are loyal to her personally, rather than to the institution. She brings in a new private secretary, a media advisor, a few ladies-in-waiting, who genuinely care about her well-being. She builds a small fortress within the larger palace structure. She also starts talking, cautiously at first, to journalists she trusts, deep background, no attribution, planting seeds of stories that will shift public perception. The press begins to report on the state of the Wales's marriage, on Charles's relationship with Camilla, on Diana's struggles with the palace system. These stories do not come from official sources. They are leaks, whispers, information carefully fed to sympathetic reporters. The palace is furious. Leaking to the press is one of the worst sins in royal circles. The institution is built on discretion, on maintaining the facade at all costs. Diana is tearing holes in that facade, but they cannot prove she is the source. And confronting her directly would only make things worse, would risk her leaking more, or going public with accusations. Diana is learning to weaponize her fame. The palace wants to control her image to serve the monarchy. She is using her image to tell her truth. It is a dangerous game. The institution has far more resources, far more experience, far more power. But Diana has the public, and increasingly, the public is on her side. By the late 1980s, the marriage is unsustainable. They are living separate lives, keeping up appearances at official events, but barely tolerating each other in private. Divorce is unthinkable, at least publicly. The heir to the throne has never divorced. The Church of England, which the future king will head, does not look kindly on divorce. The Queen and Prince Philip are deeply opposed. But something has to give. Diana cannot continue like this indefinitely. She is in her late 20s, still young, watching her life slip away in a gilded cage. She has her children, her charity work, her public adoration. But she does not have love, freedom, or peace. And she is beginning to believe she deserves all three. The question is, how to get them? How to break free from a system that has never allowed anyone in her position to simply leave. How to escape a marriage that is not just a personal relationship, but a constitutional arrangement. How to step away from a role the entire world has assigned her without destroying herself in the process. Diana does not have the answer yet, but she is working on it, and she is gathering allies. Friends outside the palace who listen to her, support her, keep her secrets. Journalists who will tell her side of the story when she is ready. Legal advisors who can explain what divorce might look like for a princess. Therapists who help her understand her own pain and how to survive it. Kensington Palace is no longer just her residence. It is her headquarters, the place where she plots her next move. The walls have seen her cry, have witnessed her lowest moments, but they are also witnessing her transformation. Diana is not the naive 20-year-old who arrived here in 1981. She is a woman who has been tested, hurt, contained, and underestimated, and she is done playing by their rules. The system built this palace to contain her. She is about to use it to launch her counterattack, and when she does, the institution will realize too late that they taught her too well. She knows how they think, how they operate, where their vulnerabilities are, because she has been watching them for nearly a decade, and she is ready. The early 1990s bring a new phase. Diana is no longer trying to make the marriage work. She has accepted it is over. Now she is positioning herself for what comes next. She knows divorce will be brutal, that the palace will close ranks against her, that she will be painted as the problem. So she needs to ensure the public stays on her side. She increases her charity work, focusing on causes that showcase her compassion. Landmines become a major focus. She travels to Angola and walks through minefields. The images broadcast worldwide. The British government is initially annoyed. She is interfering in policy debates, but the public response is overwhelming. Diana is using her platform for something that matters. She works with AIDS organizations, hospices, homeless shelters. She is photographed constantly, always warm, always engaged, always presenting herself as someone who genuinely cares. And the truth is, she does care. The compassion is real. But she is also strategic enough to know that these images are building a narrative. Diana as saint, Diana as humanitarian, Diana as a woman who deserves better than the cold, distant marriage she has been trapped in. The palace tries to counter this. They brief sympathetic journalists about Diana's difficult behavior, her mood swings, her demands on staff. Stories begin appearing, suggesting she is manipulative, that she uses emotional displays to get her way, that she is harder to work with than the public realizes. But these stories do not gain much traction. The public has chosen their side. In 1992, Andrew Morton publishes Diana, Her True Story. The book is explosive. It details Diana's bulimia, her suicide attempts, Charles's affair with Camilla, the coldness of the royal family, the palace's failure to support her. The palace immediately denies everything, insists Diana had nothing to do with the book, claims it is all fabrication and rumor. But Diana did cooperate. Secretly, through an intermediary, she gave Morton detailed information, answering questions, correcting facts, ensuring the story told was her story. The palace does not know this yet. They think Morton pieced it together from various sources. Diana plays innocent, says she is as shocked as anyone by the revelations. The book shifts public opinion dramatically. People who had suspected the marriage was troubled now have confirmation. People who thought Diana was simply a clothes horse now understand she has been suffering. The sympathy for her intensifies. Charles's reputation takes a serious hit. Later that year, transcripts of phone calls are leaked. Camillagate, recordings of intimate conversations between Charles and Camilla, proving beyond doubt that they are having an affair. Then Squidgygate, recordings of Diana's conversations with a close friend, revealing her frustration with the marriage and the royal family. Both leaks are damaging, but the public focuses more on Charles's betrayal than on Diana's complaints. The marriage is now publicly acknowledged to be in crisis. The palace can no longer maintain the fiction that everything is fine. In December 1992, Prime Minister John Major announces in Parliament that the Prince and Princess of Wales are separating, not divorcing, separating. They will live apart, but remain married for the foreseeable future. Diana will retain her title and continue her official duties. Diana has won a battle. She is out of the daily misery of living with Charles, out from under the constant weight of pretending. But she has not won the war. The palace still controls much of her life. She is still royal, still bound by protocols and expectations, and the institution is not done fighting. The next few years are a cold war between Diana and the palace. She continues her charity work, her public appearances, carefully curating her image. She gives a few interviews, calculated statements that express her pain while maintaining dignity. She says there were 3 people in the marriage, referring to Camilla, a line that becomes iconic. The palace briefs against her constantly. Anonymous sources tell journalists she is difficult, unstable, a concern for her children's well-being. They question her judgment, her choice of friends, her decision to step back from some royal duties. They paint her as someone who wants the perks of being royal without the responsibilities. Diana counters by being even more visible, even more beloved. She attends film premieres and charity galas, looking stunning, generating headlines. She travels internationally, meeting world leaders, advocating for causes. She makes sure the public sees her as independent, strong, thriving, despite the palace's attempts to diminish her. Behind the scenes, lawyers are negotiating. Divorce is now inevitable. The question is terms. What title will Diana keep? How much access will she have to the children? What financial settlement is appropriate? What role, if any, will she continue to play in royal life? Diana wants to remain Her Royal Highness, wants equal custody of William and Harry, wants financial security, but not dependence on the royal family for ongoing support. The palace wants to strip her royal title, wants Charles to have primary custody, wants to limit her involvement in royal affairs. The negotiations are brutal. Both sides leak to the press, trying to shape public opinion in their favor. Diana's team paints the palace as vindictive, trying to punish her for speaking truth. The palace's team paints Diana as grasping, wanting royal privileges without royal duties. In August 1996, the divorce is finalized. Diana loses her HRH title, becoming Diana, Princess of Wales, but not Her Royal Highness Princess of Wales. It is a distinction most people do not understand, but within royal circles, it is significant. She is no longer fully royal. She has been downgraded. She receives a financial settlement, reported to be £17 million, plus £400,000 per year for her office. She retains apartments at Kensington Palace. She has joint custody of William and Harry. She can continue some charity work, but is no longer an official working royal. Diana is free. Sort of. She is out of the marriage, out from under the most direct palace control. But she is also unmoored. For 15 years, her identity has been Princess of Wales. Now she has to figure out who she is without that role. She considers leaving England, starting fresh somewhere else. Friends suggest America, where she could have more privacy, less press intrusion. But she cannot leave her sons. William and Harry are still in school, still need her, still tied to royal life. So she stays. Kensington Palace becomes her base. The apartments are hers, at least for now. She redesigns them, making them feel more personal, less like royal residences. She chooses her own furniture, her own art, her own colors, small acts of independence that mean more than they might seem. These rooms are finally hers. She thinks about what comes next. She is 35 years old. She has decades ahead of her. She could remarry, though any relationship will be complicated by her status and fame. She could focus entirely on charity work, build a legacy separate from the royal family. She could write a book, give interviews, tell her full story, now that she is no longer constrained by marriage. She begins dating. Hasnat Khan, a heart surgeon, becomes a serious relationship for a while. She is drawn to his intelligence, his normalcy, his distance from the world she has inhabited. But the press finds out, as they always do, and the scrutiny becomes overwhelming. The relationship ends. Then Dodi Fayed enters her life, son of Mohammed Al Fayed, owner of Harrods and the Ritz Paris. Dodi is charming, wealthy, connected. Diana is photographed with him on his father's yacht in the Mediterranean. The pictures are everywhere. The press speculates about engagement, about Diana becoming part of a different powerful family. The royal family is reportedly uneasy. Mohammed Al Fayed is not someone they trust. He has business interests they find questionable, social ambitions they find gauche. The idea of the mother of the future king being involved with this family makes them uncomfortable. Diana seems happy, at least in the photographs, relaxed, smiling, enjoying herself. Whether the relationship is serious or just a summer romance is unclear. Perhaps Diana herself does not know yet. She is still finding her footing in this new life. August 1997. Diana and Dodi are in Paris. They have dinner at the Ritz. Paparazzi are everywhere, chasing them constantly. They leave the hotel through a back entrance, trying to evade the cameras. The car speeds through Paris streets, photographers on motorcycles pursuing. The car enters the Pont de l'Alma tunnel. It crashes. Dodi is killed instantly. Diana is critically injured. She is taken to hospital, but dies in the early hours of August 31st. She is 36 years old. The news breaks, and the world stops. People weep in the streets. Flowers begin appearing at Kensington Palace within hours, piling up against the gates, covering the sidewalks. thousands upon thousands of bouquets and notes and photographs. The grief is overwhelming, almost irrational in its intensity. Diana has become something more than a person. She is a symbol, an idea, a projection of whatever people needed her to be. Her death feels personal to millions who never met her. They mourn her as if they knew her, as if they have lost someone from their own lives. The royal family initially misjudges the public mood. They are at Balmoral in Scotland. When Diana dies, they issue a brief statement. They do not return to London immediately. They follow protocol, which says they should remain composed, private, dignified in grief. But the public does not want protocol. They want emotion. They want the royal family to acknowledge Diana's importance, to show that they cared about her, to mourn publicly. The silence from Balmoral is read as coldness, as indifference, as evidence that the palace never appreciated Diana, and still does not. The press turns on the royals. Headlines question why the Queen has not spoken, why the flag at Buckingham Palace is not at half-mast, why the family seems more concerned with tradition than with the woman who died. The criticism is harsh, the anger real. The Queen eventually returns to London and gives a televised address, speaking about Diana and the family's grief. The flag is lowered. Plans for the funeral are announced. The royals walk behind Diana's coffin in the funeral procession, a public display of mourning that helps calm the anger. Diana's funeral is watched by an estimated 2.5 billion people worldwide. Elton John sings Candle in the Wind, rewritten for Diana. Her brother Earl Spencer gives a eulogy that includes veiled criticism of the royal family and the press, suggesting both failed to protect her. The coffin is draped with flowers that spell mummy. William and Harry walk behind it, two young boys burying their mother in front of the entire world. The images are heartbreaking. Diana is buried at Althorpe, her family estate, on an island in a lake. The location is private, inaccessible to the public, protected in death. She finally has the privacy she never had in life. Kensington Palace becomes a shrine. The flowers remain for weeks, then months. People continue to come, to leave notes, to stand at the gates and remember. The palace has to organize volunteers to clear the flowers, to preserve some and dispose of others, to manage the spontaneous memorial that has taken over the grounds. Inside the palace, in the apartments, Diana decorated. Her belongings are packed up. Dresses, photographs, personal items. Her sons inherit some, charities receive others. The rooms are eventually reassigned to other royals. Life moves on, but the question remains. What was Diana planning? She was free of the marriage, building a new life, positioning herself for something. What was that something? What would she have become if she had lived? Some believe she would have remarried, perhaps to someone outside the British establishment, and lived more quietly. Others think she would have become a global humanitarian figure, using her fame to champion causes like landmines and AIDS on an even larger scale. Some speculate she would have eventually written a full autobiography, telling her story in her own words without intermediaries. We will never know. What we do know is that Diana spent her years at Kensington Palace learning how power works, how images shape reality, how institutions protect themselves. She learned by being hurt, by being controlled, by being underestimated, and she used what she learned to fight back. The palace thought they were managing her. She was documenting them. They thought she was a problem to be contained. She was gathering evidence for a case she would eventually make to the world. They thought her fame was a tool they could control. She turned it into a weapon. Kensington Palace was meant to be her gilded cage. She made it her fortress. The system was designed to break her. She nearly broke it instead. And even in death, she forced the institution to change, to modernize, to recognize that the old rules no longer worked in a world where images could be broadcast instantly and public opinion could shift overnight. Diana did not destroy the monarchy, but she exposed its vulnerabilities. She showed that the facade could crack, that the private lives behind palace walls mattered, that sympathy could shift from institution to individual. She proved that even inside a system designed to control every aspect of her life, one person with courage and strategy could fight back. The flowers at Kensington Palace eventually cleared. The gates returned to normal. Tourists come now to see where Diana lived, to learn about her life, to take photographs. The palace tells her story, at least a version of it, in exhibitions and guided tours. But the full story, the one that played out in these rooms, in the private moments between public appearances, in the calculations and compromises and small rebellions, that story is harder to capture. It is in the letters Diana wrote late at night, in the phone calls she made to journalists she trusted, in the conversations with friends where she admitted how trapped she felt and how desperately she wanted out. It is in the way she learned to smile for cameras while dying inside, in the way she used fashion as armor in communication, in the way she fought an institution with centuries of experience in crushing dissent and somehow managed to win the public to her side. Diana spent 15 years at Kensington Palace. She arrived as a girl and left as a woman who had learned to navigate one of the most complex, most powerful systems in the world. She did not escape unscathed. The cost was enormous. Her mental health, her marriage, years of misery and isolation. But she survived, and she made sure the world knew what survival required. She refused to disappear quietly, to accept the role assigned to her, to pretend everything was fine when it was not. She spoke truth, loudly and publicly, and forced people to listen. The palace has never quite recovered from Diana. They learned lessons, modernized somewhat, became slightly more willing to acknowledge emotion and vulnerability. But the institution remains fundamentally the same. It still prioritizes continuity over individuals, protocol over feelings, the facade over truth. Diana's sons, William and Harry, grew up watching what the system did to their mother. William has worked within it, trying to change it from inside while accepting his role. Harry eventually left, walked away from royal life, took his family to America. Different choices, but both shaped by Diana's experience. Kensington Palace still stands. Red brick, tall windows, formal gardens, beautiful and cold. Inside, royals still live in apartments, surrounded by staff and protocol. The machinery continues, but everyone who works there now knows what happened to Diana. They know the system failed her. They know she fought back. They know how close she came to bringing the whole thing down. And they know that the public remembers, that Diana remains more beloved than almost any living royal, that her story is not forgotten, not forgiven, not neatly filed away, that Kensington Palace is not just a residence, but a reminder of what happens when institutions forget that the people inside them are human. Diana planned her revenge. She executed it brilliantly. She used the only tools available to her: her image, her story, her willingness to break rules that were designed to keep her silent. She paid a terrible price, but she won. The institution survived, but it was wounded in ways it still has not fully healed from. And every tourist who stands at the gates of Kensington Palace, every person who leaves flowers on the anniversary of her death, every documentary about her life, every article re-examining her story, is evidence that Diana's revenge continues. She wanted the truth told. She wanted the world to know what happened to her behind these walls. And she succeeded. The palace tried to erase her, to control her memory, to shape the narrative after her death, but they could not. Diana had already spoken. The world had already heard. And once people hear truth, especially truth about institutions that claim to be beyond reproach. They do not forget. Kensington Palace is Diana's monument and her indictment, the place where she suffered, and the place from which she launched her counterattack, the system's greatest failure and her greatest victory. Beautiful rooms that witnessed ugly truths, a palace that was supposed to protect her, but became the fortress she defended herself from. If the walls could speak, they would tell you all of this. They would tell you about the young woman who arrived not knowing the rules and left having rewritten them, about the tears shed in private and the smiles performed in public, about the marriage that was a lie and the image that was a weapon, about the institution that underestimated her and the woman who made them pay for it. But the walls stay silent. That is their job, to hold secrets, to witness without speaking, to preserve the facade. Diana broke that silence. She spoke when she was supposed to stay quiet. She told truths that were supposed to remain private. She chose her own voice over the institution's script, and that is why Kensington Palace will always be associated with her. Not because she was happy here. She was not. Not because she triumphed here. Her victory came at unbearable cost, but because she transformed here, from victim to fighter, from princess to person, from someone controlled by the system to someone who learned to make the system fear her. The tourists taking photographs do not know most of this. They see the beautiful building, the elegant gardens, the plaque marking where Diana lived. They think about the fairy tale, the tragedy, the doomed princess. They do not think about the strategy, the calculation, the cold-blooded determination to survive and to make sure the world knew what survival required. But that is the real story. Not fairy tale. War. Not tragedy. Triumph. Flawed and painful and incomplete, but real. Diana did not get the happy ending she wanted, but she got something else. She got to tell her truth. She got to force one of the most powerful institutions on earth to confront its failures. She got to show millions of people that it is possible to fight back, even when the odds are overwhelming, even when the cost is terrible. Kensington Palace keeps that truth locked in its stones. The official story the palace tells is softer, safer, less accusatory. But anyone who looks carefully can still see the evidence. In the rooms Diana chose, in the charities she championed, in the way the palace changed after her. However reluctantly, she lived here. She suffered here. She planned here. And from here, she launched the most successful challenge to the British monarchy in modern history, not with armies or politics, but with truth, with image, with the simple insistence that her life, her pain, her story mattered as much as the institution's reputation. The palace survived Diana, but it was never the same. She exposed its machinery, showed the world how it worked, revealed the gap between public image and private reality. She made people question whether the institution deserved the reverence it demanded. She made them wonder if tradition was worth the human cost. And she did all of this while living in these apartments, walking these corridors, sleeping in these bedrooms. Kensington Palace was her battlefield. Every room a position she defended or conceded. Every decision a tactical move in a larger campaign. Every public appearance a carefully calculated strike. Diana's revenge was not violent. It was patient, strategic, devastating. She turned her pain into power, her isolation into independence, her victimhood into agency. She used the very tools the palace gave her, her title, her fame, her access, and turned them against the institution that thought it owned her. The palace could have prevented this if they had supported her, if they had helped her navigate royal life, if they had intervened in the failing marriage, if they had prioritized her well-being over public image. But they did not. They followed protocol. They maintained tradition. They protected the institution. And in doing so, They created their greatest threat, a young woman with nothing left to lose, with millions of supporters, with intimate knowledge of how the system worked, and with the courage to use all of that against them. Diana learned in these rooms that the palace was not invincible, that public opinion mattered more than protocol, that the monarchy's power rested on public consent, and that consent could be withdrawn if people stopped believing in the fairy tale. She tested that power, pushed against it, and found it gave way more easily than anyone expected. The palace scrambled to contain the damage, briefed journalists, tried to discredit her, fought back with every tool they had. But she was faster, more sympathetic, better understood. By the time they realized how seriously they had underestimated her, it was too late. Diana had won the public. The palace could strip her title, could divorce her, could push her to the margins of royal life, but they could not make people stop loving her, could not make people forget her story, could not undo the damage to their reputation. Kensington Palace witnessed all of this. The quiet transformation of a young bride into a formidable opponent, the gradual accumulation of knowledge and strategy, the careful building of alliances outside the palace walls, the decisive moves when the moment was right, and then it witnessed the aftermath. The empty apartments after her death, the flowers outside the gates, the public grief that bordered on hysteria, the anger directed at the royal family, the sense that something precious had been lost, and someone was to blame. The palace learned from Diana's death. They became more media savvy, more willing to show emotion, more protective of younger royals who might otherwise face similar pressures. They modernized, reluctantly, but necessarily. But they also lost something: the mystique, the unquestioned authority, the assumption that the institution always knew best. Diana stripped that away. She showed that royals were human, flawed, capable of cruelty and failure, and once that truth was visible, it could not be hidden again. Kensington Palace holds all of this history, not in plaques or exhibitions, but in the bones of the building, in the rooms Diana occupied, in the air that still seems to carry echoes of arguments and tears and desperate phone calls. You can visit now. Walk through the staterooms, see the elegant furniture and the beautiful art. Learn about the building's history, the royals who lived here over centuries. And if you know what to look for, you can see the traces of Diana's war, the apartment where she planned her panorama interview, the phone she used to call journalists, the sitting room where she met with advisors, plotting her next move, the bedroom where she lay awake, worrying about her sons and her future. The palace presents this as history, as something safely in the past, but it is not. Diana's story is not over. It continues in every person who questions institutional power, in every whistleblower who speaks truth despite consequences, in every individual who refuses to be silenced by systems designed to contain them. Diana showed it was possible. Not easy, not painless, but possible, to stand up to immense power and survive, to tell your truth even when the world's most powerful people want you to stay quiet, to fight back when every rule, every tradition, every authority figure says you should submit. Kensington Palace was supposed to break her. It nearly did, but Diana was tougher than anyone expected. She absorbed everything the system threw at her, learned from it, adapted, and used it to fuel her counterattack. The building still stands, beautiful and imposing, but it carries a lesson now, a warning. Institutions that forget the humanity of the people within them create their own enemies. Systems that prioritize image over truth eventually face someone willing to tear down the facade. Power that depends on silence eventually encounters someone brave enough to speak. Diana was that someone. Kensington Palace was her school and her fortress. the place where she learned the rules so she could break them, where she suffered so deeply she had nothing left to lose, where she planned the revenge that would reshape the monarchy forever. The tourists leave, the gates close. The palace settles into evening quiet, but the stories remain, in the walls, in the memories, in the continuing impact of what happened here. Diana is gone, but what she did in these rooms, what she learned, what she unleashed, echoes still, and anyone who walks through Kensington Palace now walks through that echo, through the aftermath of a war, fought with images and interviews, and carefully leaked information, through the remains of a battle between a young woman and an ancient institution, through evidence that even the most powerful systems can be challenged, exposed, changed. Diana won and lost. She got her truth told but died before she could build the life she wanted. She hurt the institution, but could not destroy it. She liberated herself, but at terrible cost. Her revenge was real but incomplete. Yet what she accomplished was extraordinary. She took on the British monarchy and survived long enough to inflict lasting damage. She showed millions of people that questioning power was not only possible, but necessary. She transformed from victim to warrior, from passive princess to active agent of her own story. Kensington Palace keeps that story locked in its stones. Beautiful rooms that saw ugly truths, elegant facades that hid desperate struggles, a palace that was prison and fortress, cage and headquarters, site of Diana's greatest suffering and her most effective resistance. If you visit, look carefully, past the polish and the pageantry, past the official narratives and sanitized history. Look for the traces of the woman who lived here and fought here and refused to disappear quietly. She is still there, in the structure of the place, in the way the light falls through certain windows, in the shadows of rooms that remember her tears and her determination. Diana haunts Kensington Palace, not as a ghost, but as an indelible mark, proof that one person with courage and strategy can shake even the most established powers. The palace survived her, but it will never forget her, and neither will the world. The flowers may have been cleared from the gates, the tears may have dried, time may have moved forward, but Diana's revenge continues. Every time someone looks at Kensington Palace and thinks not of the crown, but of the woman who wore it, every time the palace is forced to change because of lessons learned from failing her, every time truth matters more than protocol because she insisted it should, that is her legacy. Not the fairy tale, the fight, not the tragedy, the resistance, not the perfect princess, the imperfect, complicated, brave woman who refused to accept the role assigned to her and insisted on writing her own story, no matter what it cost. Kensington Palace is where she wrote it, where she lived it, where she fought for it, and where, even in death, she won it. The system tried to erase her. She made herself unforgettable. They tried to silence her. She made her voice louder than theirs. They tried to reduce her to a supporting role in someone else's story. She made it impossible for anyone to tell that story without putting her at the center. The palace doors close each evening. The lights go out in the apartments. The grounds settle into darkness. But Diana's presence remains in every corner where she cried, in every room where she planned, in every window where she looked out at crowds who loved her more than the institution that tried to contain her. Kensington Palace is Diana's monument, not the one she would have chosen, not the one the palace wanted, but the one that tells the truth about power and resistance, about institutions and individuals, about what happens when someone refuses to be erased. She lived here. She fought here. She won here. And the palace will carry that truth in its walls forever. Beautiful and broken, elegant and exposed, a fortress that could not hold her, a prison that could not contain her, a system that underestimated her and paid the price. That is the dark story of Kensington Palace. Not darkness as evil, but as hidden truth brought into light, as secrets revealed, as power challenged, as one woman's refusal to stay silent, changing everything. The tourists do not know most of this. They see the beauty and miss the battle. They admire the architecture and overlook the war that was fought within it. They take their photographs and leave, thinking they have seen where a princess lived. They have not. They have seen where a revolution began. Quiet, personal, devastating. A revolution that did not overthrow the monarchy, but transformed it. That did not destroy the system, but exposed it. That did not erase tradition, but forced it to acknowledge that traditions can cause harm and must change. Diana did that. From these rooms, through these walls, using the only weapons available to her: truth, image, timing, courage. Kensington Palace tried to hold her. She turned it into her launching pad. They thought these walls protected them from her. She used them to protect herself from them. They believed the palace gave them power over her. She proved the palace gave her leverage against them. And when she was done, when the battles were fought, and the truth was told, and the price was paid, Kensington Palace stood as evidence of everything she endured, everything she fought, everything she changed. The palace remains, but it belongs to Diana now, not legally, not officially, but in memory, in history, in the understanding that this place will forever be associated with her story, more than with any other royal who lived here. That was her revenge, not destruction, appropriation. She took the palace that was meant to contain her and made it testify for her, made it evidence of the institution's failures, made it proof that she existed, suffered, fought back, mattered. And every person who visits, every story told about Diana, every documentary and book and article reinforces that revenge. The palace wanted to control her memory. She made her memory bigger than the palace itself. That is what you are seeing when you look at Kensington Palace today. Not just a beautiful building, a battlefield Diana fought on and won. Not just a royal residence, a monument to the woman who lived there and refused to be defeated by it. She is gone. The palace remains, but the palace is hers now, forever marked by her presence, her pain, her resistance, her victory, a beautiful building that will never escape the shadow of the woman who lived there and changed everything. That is the dark story. That is the truth the walls hold. That is what Kensington Palace really is. Diana's fortress, Diana's weapon, Diana's revenge. And nothing the institution does will ever change that.